This video is an extract from an interview where an art professional shares their top tips for artists. Thanks for watching, and we hope you enjoy this video. Welcome to tonight's webinar on the Art Ladder with none other than Liz Gilmore, who is the director of Hastings Contemporary. Liz started her career at the National Gallery as an education officer, and then you went on to the Arts Council, where you were looking after a large portfolio in the Southeast. And then the Jerwood Foundation, who you were working with, opened at the time a new public gallery in Hastings, which is now known as Hastings Contemporary, which you've been spearheading for over a decade. So you've got a very wide career across museums, funding, now directing a gallery.
I didn't have a specific objective that I must be a gallery director. I had done a master's in museum studies. I did history of art as a degree to start with. And I knew broadly that I was quite interested in museums and galleries. But it wasn't really until I did a work placement as part of my MA where I had a chance to try things out and see really what the roles were like. And then my first kind of proper applied for job was the National Gallery, and I got a job as an education officer with a specific remit to set up the out of schools and family programme. Really, it was about bringing new audiences to the National Gallery, and that led me to apply for a job that came up at the Arts Council initially, which was head of visual arts for the Southeast region. Definitely helped. You start thinking about capital master planning and broader fundraising, which is such an important part of my job now. So during the actual day-to-day business, I got to meet the Jerwood Foundation, and subsequently they approached me about whether I would be interested in setting up a gallery in Hastings. So it was a capital build. It was a piece of concrete when I arrived. A year and a half later, the gallery was built, and then it was about bringing on a team and building every aspect of operation that goes with a gallery.
You had to literally build a gallery from the ground up. Today, what does your role look like?
It set off, I was working for Jerwood Foundation and running the gallery for them. We had architects that did these incredible plans, and then we brought the team on. At that point, it was about building up everything you expect with a sort of public gallery. We had a shop, cafe, so we're dealing with cafe operators, what shop stock we would have, but fundamentally what art we would put in the building and who would come.
In particular with exhibitions, it's years in the making of thinking about who you're going to work with, what you're going to show, then catalogs, curation, staff. So what does that process look like for you?
Yeah, it can be very varied. I think back to the first exhibition we put on, Rose Wiley, then 76 years old, had 40 years of work in the store cupboard. I hadn't really had her big break. She was being talked about among those that knew in the art world. That show came about really fast. And of course, she had all her work, 40 years of work. So that was a 3-month process from start to finish of thinking of what our inaugural show would be. That's probably one of the fastest, not necessarily the fastest, but ordinarily we would be looking probably at a 3-year planning cycle. It does vary show by show.
So for anybody who's dreaming of one day seeing their work in Hastings Contemporary, how do you go about finding out new artists?
We go about the world actively looking at artistic talent, and there's so much talent out there. That's the frustration. We can only have 4 shows a year or something. And so how does one pick those, and how much do we regret not being able to show many other people? Of course. And it is really difficult. What we try to do is think about how we reflect the demographic in Hastings, so it's relevant, but also how we reflect what is hot, important, exciting in the art world today, and to make that present in Hastings. All of that is about balancing, and it relies on relationships with commercial galleries who we need help from in order to sometimes realise shows. But also we want to be able to show artists that don't have gallery representation. And we do look for talent. A key part of that is being able to bring to the public attention, artists who otherwise would have not had this opportunity. And so sometimes that does come from recommendation, from insight from trustees, from other colleagues, from going about the world and seeing art on the walls. There isn't one set way of getting a show, but obviously getting to know that people are actually there is a really key way of even being able to be considered. Because if you're hidden away, your work's never seen, how will we ever come knocking on the door? We won't. In the instance of Rose Wiley, she actually was part of a group show at the Approach Gallery in London. That's where I had opportunity to meet her. The Approach is a commercial gallery, but that doesn't always happen that way. And sometimes we're thinking, I'm really interested in so-and-so's work. How can I get connection with them? And we're quite proactive about doing that as well.
It's always interesting, I think, to know what different sources or what different places, whether you're looking on Instagram to just find out through contacts different artists, or whether you're trying to visit locally open studios or other museums. Like, what's your sort of typical sources or your network?
Certainly through COVID, we looked a lot on Instagram, and I was involved with a different initiative on Instagram that put thousands of artists. I could see their works.
Are you on about the artist support pledge or something?
Yeah, I am. And literally, there's 100,000 artists part of Artist Support Pledge, but that's in a feed that I constantly see. It's brilliant to be able to do that. I do a lot of visits, go to see a lot of exhibitions. Every time I open my mail, I see more art. So it's a constant thing of being able to see art. And I suppose we're like magpies, museum directors. You see something you like, you keep hold of the visual image, and that might sit with you for a couple of years, and then you go back to it, or you might think about its relevance moving forward. I think what we've tried to do in Hastings is not be afraid of being dictated by some of the forces that one might be in other circumstances. So, for example, what the sales value is. You can go online and look at an artist's sales value, and that would be an easy and foolish way, probably, to dismiss talent, because if it hasn't got a track record of sales, how can you be sure it's worth showing? I suppose what we try to do is judge it by what it looks like and to create the sales for it. But that isn't always easy to do when you're running a public gallery, where people might want reassurance. Are they credible? How are they known? It's particularly interesting with contemporary artists because there can be a tendency to think it's got to be a name, because unless it's a name, people won't come and see it. We show work that we believe in, and we show work that we think is really important and influential and original. We try to pick the originators of things that we think are important, and we try to intersect that. People love celebrity. So how does one create exhibitions of new talent for the many artists who should have that platform that they deserve, when we can be quite narrow as a nation in our focus of what we think we want to see? And perhaps people always want to see Picasso and Van Gogh and certain artists that are the ones that they feel secure with. And how do you break that mold? That's our job, really, to do that. We try to do things where we can show as much work as possible, group shows where we can be much more open, but we just have to balance that with a whole host of thoughts and considerations, and not least keeping the doors open to the charity. And that's huge. That's a huge endeavour to a tiny team. So we don't always get it right, probably, but we try to as much as we can.
When working with artists, and I hope this can be useful to any artist, whether they go on to have an exhibition in a public gallery or whether it's with a commercial gallery, what are some of the key elements that make maybe an artist more appealing or easier to work with? Or what are some of the do's and don'ts when you're preparing an exhibition that for you as a public gallery director makes your life easier and makes you really want to work with that person again?
That's an interesting question, because in the 12 years, 13 years now we've been operating, I'd say we've met so many brilliant artists who are all so different in the way they operate. And that diversity is incredibly enriching. And so it's not that they have to be something that they're not. And I think being their authentic self is probably number one. They might struggle to verbally communicate in the way that others might. That might not be their strength. They're visual artists after all. And so how can we have meaningful conversations with them if they're not feeling massively comfortable about articulating the art? It's not that we want them to change at all. I think it's just for them to be able to, at the very beginning, just say that this is me. I don't want to do public talks, or I love doing public talks. Let me do lots of them. And we are really flexible. We celebrate that diversity of individuals. I think it really helps for them to be as open with us as possible about who and what they are, so that we know what to expect in terms of delivery of work or how productive they might be. We might agree to do a show in 3 years' time, and that might put them under considerable pressure if they're quite slow in making the work. There's all sorts of reasons for that, but some may be incredibly productive and make a whole body of work in 3 months. And getting sense about who and what they are, how they like to work, and agreeing in advance. We want our relationships with artists to be incredibly positive, and just them being able to say what their expectations are from the show, but also to trust us, because sometimes it might be better that we lay out the exhibition and take that pressure from them of selecting the work. It can be quite hard, I think, to have that distance and space, especially if you've just been working up to making the work. They've all been brilliant in their different ways, and that those kinds of relationships grow as we get to know the artist.
I know you mentioned the Artist Support Pledge and having a look on Instagram and websites. Is there anything in particular, maybe any top tips or anything that you look for in an artist's online presence?
I suppose, in a way, when you can only judge it on a screen, and a screen often so big, the size of a phone, it's making sure that it looks as professional as it can be. You don't need to spend lots of money doing that, but really tidying it up so there's a consistency of image, having decently lit photographs, which again you can do yourself. But for me, and for a lot of people, I find it really helpful just to know a bit more about an image as well. Just some sort of anecdote on that. I made this when I was thinking about X, or stuff that just makes it human, I think, and touches the soul of the people that are looking at it. And it doesn't have to be lots of text, but just saying, revealing a little bit about yourself. Some people may not want to do that. They could do little videos. They can do in views of their studio, showing their working practice. That's another interesting way of revealing a little bit more about yourself. So it hasn't got to be spoken word as such, but showing the context. I'm always surprised, and pleasantly surprised, how interested the public are, the general public who don't make art, in what artists do and how they make art. And so just revealing things like that, showing your workspace, your context. You're amazed how fascinated people are by that. And that's really exciting to see.
Thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch the full 1-hour interview and get top tips from an expert, then click the link below and join the Art Ladder mentoring program now. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this, and check out the description below for more free resources for artists.